Hey, NoNonsenseKnowHow here. Today, I want to try and give you some quick instructions and run through on how to replace the timing belt and water pump on this 2011 Honda Pilot. It's got the 3.5 liter in it. Now, I'm going to be using this Dayco kit. I do recommend going with a quality kit if you're going to be doing this job. So we're going to be replacing the belt, the tensioner, the tensioner pulley, the tensioner itself, idler pulley, water pump and O-ring. This is a GMB pump. I've had good luck with these, never have any problems at all. Here's a look at the instructions in case you want to pause that to be able to look through those. This is due every 105,000 miles or 84 months on a Honda. This one has 123,000 on it. Here's a look at the diagram here if you want to pause that so you can take a look at that. Here's your torque specs, 181 foot-pounds on the crank bolt. All of the M8x125 bolts are going to be 33 foot-pounds. The M6x1 bolts are going to be 9 foot-pounds. You don't have to use a torque wrench on those. I definitely recommend using the torque wrench on the crank pulley. And when you're putting this back together, since I'm not going to show you exactly how to put every little bolt back together, but when you're putting it together, it's a great idea to put some blue Loctite on pretty much each bolt you put back together, especially the crank bolt and the bolts holding these pulleys on for sure. Also, the bolts holding your tensioner on. A little bit of Loctite on those. So let's get started here. Also, I find it helpful to get the hood up in the high position instead of putting it in one of these two slots. Put it in this one down here. Gets it up a little higher, gives you some more clearance. By the way, sorry if I sound a little tired today, a little beat. I only slept like 4.5 hours last night, so a little sleepy, but we'll still get it done, all right? I'm going to give you the run through and try to give you the quick version. This is going to be more so for your experienced DIYers, people that know how to use tools and things like that. So start by cracking your petcock on the bottom of your radiator to drain your coolant. The petcock's located on the passenger side underneath this cover right here. It just hangs down and it's right up here, this little plastic knob here. You turn that counterclockwise. I've made a socket that I cut and modified to get those because sometimes they can be kind of tight. You can use a pair of pliers too though. Then come up, remove your radiator cap to assist with the flow of that. And then go ahead and remove your negative terminal and take the J-bolt out of the battery here. It looks like this. We're going to use that later. They actually recommend chamfering the end of it as well for the purpose we're going to be using it. We can see as this is draining, I guess it kind of bad design here, goes over on the cover and gets on the ground too, so be wary of that. Get yourself some pig mats when you're draining this coolant. And come in here, turn each of these a quarter turn counterclockwise, and then this cover you actually just build. Get the car jacked up in the air with jack stands. I happen to be on a lift. And then get yourself a floor jack with a block of wood on it. Put that on the bottom of the oil pan and just put some neutral pressure on there because we're going to be taking the motor mount off. Also, remove your wheel, 22 millimeter lug nuts. And you might have a plastic cover in here. If you do, go ahead and remove that. Now, I don't know if you have to, but I'm going to get this PCM out of my way because it's in the way of the motor mount. So you got this cover on the front, one tab here, clip here, and then it just pops off on this side. Move that cover, then you got 10 millimeter bolt head here, one right down there, and then get these clips out of your way. You get these clips off, you press down right here, and then you pull back on this lever, just like that. And then get that other 10 millimeter bolt on the bottom, right down there, and you gotta pop this wire off here too. If you lift right where my fingernail is, if you lift that up and slide this back, that'll pop off of there. And same thing on the back here, you got one of those as well. Lift up where my finger is and slide this holder off. And with all that off, you can pop this up and out of here with the exception of one more connector. His tab is holding on there. This little guy right here. Alright, so take this 10 millimeter off on this right here. And then get this last connector on this side. If you stick your finger behind here and pull up on that, you can unfold this bridge just like so. Disconnect that and get this harness tucked up here out of your way. Now with that out of the way, we can get our motor mount off. Get these wire connectors off. Like I said, you push over on these and then just slide those up like that. They're all the same. Got one there too. And you have 3 17 millimeter heads holding it onto the body. One down there where my thumb is, one on the back side. Remove the With those off, we can pop this motor mount out with ease. I will say that I used a 17mm swivel socket to get to the one behind that bolt here, right here. You might have to take this 17mm off, disassemble this if you don't have a swivel socket to get in there like that. Now get yourself a 19mm socket and slip it over this tensioner right here. Then there's a lot of tension on this, and it has a hydraulic shock damper style on there, so get a breaker bar on there and slowly push tension on there. But wait till that plunger and the shock down below goes back into its bore, and then slide the belt off. Before taking the belt off fully, it's a great idea to note what pulleys it's going around. There's a view. Hopefully maybe that can help you guys out when you're putting it back together. Remove your power steering pump. You got a 12mm right here, and one down on the bottom right there beneath the gear. And tuck that up out of the way, up top on here. Actually, let's get that out of our way completely. Instead of leaning up there, have this hose in our way. Pop this clamp off here. Drain out the reservoir first if you don't want to spill any oil. Pop this clamp off this hose here so you can tuck this whole assembly up on top. Just like that. I put a cap on here as well so I didn't have to drain that. Got that out of the way. Come down here and remove your 17mm on this tensioner. And also this 12mm bolt on the shock damper portion of it. If you see oil coming out of this, replace your tensioner. Here's one more look at that tensioner assembly. Don't strip out this aluminum head on here. When I popped it off, I noticed this shim behind it actually fell down low, so this goes on the back side of this. Make sure you don't lose that. It slides on there just like that, and it's basically a retainer to hold this bolt in position. Go ahead and remove both your upper timing covers, this one and this one right here, all 10mm head bolts. You got this wire, gets tucked up in that groove as well. That's a look at those. Each one had 5 bolts holding it on. Now get a 19mm socket on this crankshaft and rotate the engine clockwise. Don't rotate it counterclockwise, that's not a good habit. And line your timing marks up so we can see the rear timing marks there. You got a notch on the cam, notch on the cover back there. I also put a little white on there so you can see them better. And here's your front timing marks. We can see there. We can see that they're all lined up. So once they're all lined up, I also like to come in here and make marks. It's just a good habit. You know, with this belt, you don't have to do this because they have pretty good timing marks. So with those white marks on there, when you put this back together, you can transfer these over to the new belt. Again, on this one, you don't really have to do that though, but some cars that's nice to have because the timing marks can be a little weird. And you know, if it was running good when you took it apart, you put it back together the same way, you'll be good. Now remove your crankshaft bolt. They make a special tool like this. I'll put a link in there if you guys want to buy one for if you're using hand tools to hold that. You know, or you can make one yourself. I've seen people do that too. Sometimes these Honda bolts can be on here really tight. So let's see if my IR will take it off. Then you can go ahead and slip that right off. If yours is rusted, sometimes spray a little lubricant in there. This one's not though. We can see also this means you're at TDC when this is pointing directly up, this keyway here. Make sure not to lose this keyway. If it's loose in there, you might, you know, I mean, this one's a little loose, so make sure not to lose that, guys. And also a good time to get this shim plate out of here like that. Use a magnet and make sure this goes on the right way. This does have a beveled edge to it. The beveled side goes against the belt, so set that on top of there so you don't mess that up along with your bolt. Now go ahead and remove your lower timing cover. It's all 10mm bolts holding that on. Here's a look at that lower timing cover. It's held on by 7 10mm head bolts. Make sure that this rubber gasket on the back's in good shape too and not swelled. If it is, replace it. You don't want that getting wrapped around the crank or anything. We can see our lower timing marks right here. This is going vertical. Little dot right here and a mark right there, that arrow. And we can also put a little mark right here if you want to go that method. Now is a good time to note, if you have any oil seepage or leakage, definitely replace your crank seal at this time, you know, when you're doing this job. And obviously your cam seals too. We're not going to have to remove these cam sprockets, but if you see oil dripping from those, it'd be a great idea to replace those cam seals, guys. All right, now we're going to use this battery J-bolt. They want you, so go ahead and thread a nut on here and then chamfer the front of this. That's what they want you to do. So when you thread that nut off, it'll clean the threads up. You're going to be threading that in this hole right here, pushing against right here. All right, so now I've got my J-bolt installed like so. You basically put it up against here with finger tight tension, just until it takes the tension off this belt. I can spin this with my hand now. Don't remove this bolt because that's still you know, under tension from the hydraulic tensioner. Now go ahead and remove these 3 14mm bolts holding this bracket on right here, one down there as well, and this 10mm right here. Get this aluminum chunk out of our way. And then now that we have the belt in time and everything, and we have the tension off, you can go ahead and remove this 14mm bolt on your idler pulley up front here. One silly little tip for you, I like to stack things in order like this, you know, because you could potentially put this cover on first and then realize you forgot to put this bracket on. But if you set it on top, you'll know it goes back together. You take this off first, put it on, then this, and the pulley. Just a little habit, because obviously I do these timing belts all the time. However, you know, when you're taking apart something that you're not familiar with, you know, and you don't have a video or instructions, good instructions, it's good to have good techniques. All right, now with the belt off, this would be the time you're going to inspect your belt. This one looks like it's not too bad, and you can transfer these marks to your new belt if you're using that method. Now come back up in here, and you see the tensioner stayed right in the spot it was supposed to, so go ahead and loosen this J-bolt, and that tensioner will back off like it did. Now that there's no pressure on the tensioner, you can remove this 14mm bolt, get that out of there, and then these 2 10mm bolts holding the hydraulic tensioner on. If you're reusing your old tensioner, provided it's not leaking and you want to do that, you're going to press this in with either a press or a vise or C-clamp until this pin lines up, and then slide a drill bit or something equivalent. Make sure it goes through both holes though. It's got to go through the hole on the other side as well, just like that. Otherwise it will bend it and break it. Don't pull this pin out until you have your engine properly timed, guys. Alright, so that's held on with 5 more 10mm head bolts around there. Once you get all those out, and you got the oil pan underneath. And of course, a bunch of coolant's gonna spill out of there. You can see our surface is in pretty good condition. If yours is corroded, make sure to clean this up really good. This is a good idea to let this thing drain out fully. Lower your jack down so all this coolant drains out of here, and then jack it back up. And before you go putting all this back together, make sure to clean all this coolant off everything. And especially on the belt surface, get that clean and dry, guys. We can see this had a factory Honda pump in it as well. Of course, it wasn't bad now, but you know what? This is a timing component. The belt rides on this, and if this pump bearing was to fail in here, this is an interference engine, and you could destroy the engine. So it's a great idea to replace that for sure. All right, so got that all cleaned up. Come over to your pump here, your new pump. Take the O-ring. Don't put any lubricant on or anything like that, but push it in all these little grooves around the whole thing. And they're going to retain the O-ring. This is crucial that, see, now that's not in the groove right there. So this is crucial that you get this lined up and set on here right, nice and dry. And then when you take it like that, I like to always take it, throw it upside down like that, check it. All right, they're all still in the groove, good to go. Now, I also like to take a little bit of very light grease or oil and just do a tiny little coating along this O-ring. And the only reason I like to do that is just for a better seal, and also so no corrosion gets in between that surface. Because when these pumps, if these O-rings do leak, it's usually from corrosion getting where that O-ring seats on the case. You don't have to do that, but you can if you want. Also notice that you have 2 locating dowels right here. I like to put a little dab of grease on those as well. So when you're taking this off in the future, it comes off with ease. The 2 first bolts you're gonna put in are the ones near the dowel pins, this one and this one here. Snug those down, don't torque them, but snug them down so the pump goes on there flush, the dowels went in flush, and then spin this, make sure it rotates freely. Put the rest of your 6mm bolts in, go ahead and torque those to 9 foot-pounds or whatever that equates to in inch-pounds. All right, tensioner's bolted in. I'm gonna say it one more time, on most of these bolts I use a little bit of blue Loctite, including the crank pulley as well. Same thing, 9 foot-pounds on those, 108 inch-pounds I think that is. Come over here, this does matter. Make sure on your tensioner, make sure this shoulder side goes against the block. So transfer that bolt in. 33 foot-pounds on your idler bolt. That's a 10mm by 125, but not on your tensioner. This is only an 8mm bolt. I don't know what the torque spec is on this, but it's not 33 foot-pounds. So you can look that up or just go good and tight with it. All right, so to slip the belt on, I put this J-bolt back up against the tensioner. I did transfer my mark, so that was nice and easy. Started on putting it on this back pulley, then around the water pump, laid it on the front pulley, lined that up. Then I came down put it on the crank. Make sure this goes flush up against the block when you're. Make sure this goes flush up against here, because maybe you got that shim and the crank pushing against there. Then I went ahead and slipped it over this idler here, and then over the tensioner last. I did take, it was a little bit of tight getting it on, so I took this 17mm wrench, and with one hand turned this counterclockwise, a little pressure, and the other, you know, slipped the belt on. That was able to assist a little bit. Now go ahead and back your J-bolt out, and pop your timing pin out. Now at this point, temporarily reinstall your crankshaft, pulley, and bolt. You don't have to torque it down, but rotate this engine 2 turns, 2 complete turns clockwise, and verify your timing marks on the crank and cam. At this point, guys, I'm going to go ahead and assemble this thing and get it together. You know, if you need to look back in the video for pointers and such and how things came apart, you can rewind it and look back at the beginning. I'm not going to show you how to put every little nut and bolt on. We got the belt on there, pumps on, everything's torqued, so we're ready to put this back together. When you're putting this computer in, it's kind of a pain to get to these lower bolts down here. So take a piece of paper towel or something like that, paper, stick it on the bolt so you can get them started. All right, got her all back together. Now's the best time to, before you start this thing, go over all your wires, bracketry, bolts, make sure everything's tight and right. Trace back in your head that you didn't forget any little things. Got the battery hooked up, close the petcock on the bottom of the radiator. Fill this up with coolant before starting it so you don't dry start the water pump. That wouldn't, you know, that's not good for it. And I'll put a link in there for this Lyle funnel here. It's pretty awesome. It comes with all the adapters for different vehicles, and you just put it on there and fill it up and walk away. All right, sounds good. So let this thing run until your radiator fan comes on. Make sure to turn the heat on and that it blows hot. And this funnel right here is great for getting the air bubbles out of here. One more little tip. Once this thing's warmed up, sometimes you'll notice you don't have heat. I still have burping air out of there, but you know, provided the engine's warmed up, grab the gas a few times like this, you know, up to 4K and such, and boom, then you can feel that it pushes all that air out of the heater core and you get nice hot heat. Might have to do that a couple times, or drive the car, of course, but I like to get there, you know, have the funnel still on there, burp all the air out of there. I'll try to put links in the description for some of the products I use, but you know, timing belt kit with water pump, the Lyle funnel kit for burping all the air out. It's great to have. Obviously your serpentine belt and tensioner if your tensioner's leaking on the serpentine belt, and of course your crank holder if you're using hand tools on this job. And I just want to apologize for some of the glitches and cutouts in that video. I was having trouble with my phone that day, kept force closing the camera and everything. So anyway, hopefully you found the video helpful still. Give it a thumbs up if you did. I definitely appreciate that. And until next time, KZ Guy 2, No Nonsense Know How.